Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Welcome. Christ is risen. Indeed, he is risen. Messiah come, hakan come. So wonderful to have you all here as we celebrate Easter week in the Catholic Church. Also, we keep in mind our brothers and sisters in the various Orthodox communities who are still celebrating the Holy Week. So this is Holy Week for them, but next week we'll be celebrating Easter with them too. And of course, we are here to take a look at St. John Paul's encyclical, Veritatis Splendor, the splendor of truth. Now, of course, you can get a paperback copy of Veritatis Splendor by going to EWTN's religious catalog. Just go to EWTNRC.com, or you can call 1-800-854-6316. Or if you prefer, download a free electronic copy of Veritatis Splendor by going to the document library of our regular website, EWTN.com. See at the top, it says libraries. Go to document library and then type in there Veritatis Splendor, and you can upload that and download it into your computer and read along with us, or if you prefer, print it out. So it's up to you. Now, of course, want to get you involved, participate in our show. You can do like all these nice people. They've come all the way from Uruguay in South America, as well as up as far north as Missouri. Not that far north. But and we'd love to have you come and join us as well. Another way to participate is send us a question by writing to threshold@ewtn.com, or you can call during our live broadcast. The phone number is 1-800-221-9460. That's if you're in North America. Outside North America, the country code is 1, and the area code is 205-271-2980. All right, we are on paragraph 17 of this encyclical, and point 2, 17.2. And again, remember back that the Pope is going through the story of the rich young man that came up to Jesus, who said, "What must I do to have eternal life?" Jesus says, "Keep the commandments." And then he asks, "What must I do to be perfect?" That's what we're dealing with here. What does that mean? So the Pope now says, perfection demands maturity. The immature are not going to be perfect. And by immaturity, usually the kind of behavior we identify as immaturity has to do a lot with self-centeredness and selfishness. Like little kids, part of their immaturity. Babies don't think, well, what would my sister or brother want me to do? When they're hungry, I want to eat. When I'm wet, I want to be changed. And when I'm cranky, I want attention. They're not asking, oh, I think mom is sleeping. I'll wait until she wakes up. Does that happen to you? No. But maturity is you begin gradually to think about others. And you grow in that as you mature. So maturity in self-giving. That's what maturity demands. Maturity in self-giving. Not just being nice. That's one of the things about culture. A lot of people in culture are willing to settle for merely being nice people, nice guys. Whereas the gospel didn't call us to be nice. Did you ever find a commandment that says, thou shalt be nice? That's why I have some hope of salvation. but rather it is self-gift that is called for. And human freedom is called to that kind of maturity. That's where you have human freedom, by being self-giving. Now, Jesus points out to the young man that the commandments, because he said, what must I do to be saved? Jesus lists the commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, honor your mother and father, and so on. Shall not steal. He lists those. When Jesus says that, he gives those as the first indispensable condition for maturity. If you say, well, I love everybody, but I think I need to kill a few of them. Well, you kind of laugh, but think about that in terms of some of the politicians. Is that so remote? Didn't Nancy Pelosi say, we've got to put birth control and abortion in the health care bill? Think of all the money we'll save. So if those babies are in the way, then we just have to get rid of them. Right? So, on one hand, it sounds ridiculous until you go to Washington. Then it sounds sensible. Think about that in terms of the various pushes for the right to die or mercy killing. Remember, they want to say, well, I want to be merciful, so I'll kill him. Those are people trying to be nice in their own way, but not in God's way. And so that's why they're the first condition. On the other hand, for the young man to give up all he possesses and to follow the Lord is presented as an invitation, not a commandment. Jesus didn't say, thou shalt give up all that you possess. Didn't say that. Thou shalt not own any property. Didn't say that. Didn't make it a commandment. It's an invitation. What the commandments, you got to do. The invitation to give up your wealth, he begins, if you wish, then sell what you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me. It's an invitation, not a commandment. And that these words of Jesus reveal the particular dynamic of the growth of freedom towards maturity. The freedom needs to grow towards maturity. We are not born mature. And as adults, it's not easy to mature. It's a struggle to mature. It takes time. And yet the struggle against some of the impulses for selfishness and self-centeredness, they do come into play. And that this is something that we have to realize. But also the words of Jesus bear witness. And when he says, if you wish, it's Jesus' words, if you wish, that his words bear witness to the fundamental relationship between freedom and God's law. See, this is one of the other crises of our society. I don't want to obey God's law. I make my own rules. I want to do what I want to do. Is that not one of the things that's common? Is not one of the anthems of the modern world for some decades now? I did it my way. Now, Sinatra sang that years ago. And a lot of people want to be able to say that. One of the sad things about most of the sinners I know, and believe me, I know sinners, they line up to meet me in a confessional. But one of the things about sinners is that they say they're doing it my way, but they pretty much do the same thing that the other sinners do. They're not that creative. They're not that creative. The saints, they're creative. They're very interesting. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, there's an interesting person. The sinners, when we're sinning, we pretty much do the same as the other sinners. Not very clever. So this relationship between freedom and God's law is very important to understand. the Pope makes a very important point. Human freedom and God's law are not in opposition the way many modern people think. On the contrary, God's law and human freedom appeal to each other, and they augment each other. And you can do the right thing, because if you don't, we'll shoot you. Okay, and for some people, that's a basic start. I can work with that. But there's a point at which you just can't point a gun at everybody every moment of the day. That's why so many murders still get committed. So, there's a sense in which the law has to be on the inside. That's why when you read the framers of the Constitution, they say either you will have the Word of God inside your heart, or you will have a bayonet pointed at you by the government from the outside. They said that back in the 1780s when they're writing the Constitution. And it's just as true now as it was then. So this is a very important issue. That law and freedom go together. They appeal to one another. The follower of Christ knows that Christ has given us a vocation to freedom, authentic freedom. We see in Galatians chapter 5, St. Paul wrote Galatians, and in chapter 5, verse 13, he begins, "For you were called to freedom, brethren." You were called to freedom. That's why the Pope calls it a vocation. A vocation means a call. You are not called to be somebody who does what everybody else tells you what to do. You're called to a freedom. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh. Well, if I'm free, then I can commit the sins I want, the things I find fun. If I like gluttony, I can do that. But no, that's not what Paul says. Rather, through love, be servants of one another. That's what your freedom is called to. That's why. How many of you parents fed your babies? I mentioned earlier, little babies are fairly self-centered. When they're hungry and wet and whatever, they're wet and hungry at that moment, they demand attention. Did you say, look, it's 3 in the morning, I'm off duty. Call me in about 5 hours when I'm on. No. You became a servant for your children, doing whatever you could. And that's what we look for with parents. Mothers and fathers serve their children and accept them with that weakness. And did you not learn the nuances of different cries? You could tell sick, hungry, wet, whiny because they just want attention, right? And you served them, you knew them for those cries, and then you taught them to speak, sometimes regretfully, but no, of course you wanted to speak. That was my dad who said that. So, the apostle says very firmly that because he, and with great firmness, that he opposes those who believe that they're justified by the law alone. Remember, that's what Galatians is about. Some people wanted to go back they were convinced by some Jewish Christians that they should go back and only obey the law of God and then obey all the laws. So no more ham sandwiches, no more shrimp cocktail, no more lobster. They had to follow the kosher laws, be circumcised, all of that stuff. And so Paul opposes them because he is very clear. The law does not redeem you. Again, read chapter 3, makes that very, very clear in Galatians. But on the contrary, the precepts of God are at the service of the practice of love. That the commandments of God guide the way you love. Love we'll talk about it in a second. Let's just take a look at this passage from Romans 13, beginning with verse 8 and 9, where St. Paul wrote to them, probably fairly soon after writing Galatians. Pretty soon, they're very close to each other in time, most likely. But in Romans 13, verse 8, he says, owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves his neighbor has fulfilled the law, the commandments, such as you shall not commit adultery, you shall not kill, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this sentence, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, if you love your neighbor, you won't kill them. If you love your neighbor, you won't commit adultery against them or with them. If you love your neighbor, you won't steal their stuff. You may ask, may I have a piece of cake? But you won't break in their house and take their cakes. You don't do that, not if you love them. And so on, so that the commandments, the love is a choice that comes from inside. The commandments give it guidance. And St. Augustine reflects on that in his In Johannis Evangelium Tractatus, which is his tractate on the Gospel of John, book 41, paragraph 10. St. Augustine wrote, says someone, why is it not completed liberty to obey the law? See, that's Augustine's point. Obeying the law is not complete freedom. He's not saying that the gospel doesn't say that. Why not? Because I see another law in my members warring against the law of my mind. For what I would, he says, that I do not. But what I hate, that I do. The flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. So that you do not the things that you would do. So this is a quotation from Romans chapter 7, verse 14 and following. St. Paul had the same problem most of us have. We want to do what's right, but there's a war inside of us saying, no. I was so good during Lent, and I gave up all this stuff. Boy, those cakes sure look good now. And what is a piece of cake without some ice cream on top? And we want to have, all that good stuff. And of course, there's room for enjoyment, but anybody who goes on a diet knows how difficult that is. And if it's true with a diet, it's also true with various areas of sin. We want to be good. How many people try to stop gossiping? How many people try to stop having lustful thoughts? How many people try to stop coveting and being envious of what other people have? But it's difficult because there's an interior disorder. So St. Augustine goes on. In part liberty, in part bondage. Not yet entire, not yet pure, not yet full liberty, because not yet eternity. For we still have infirmity in part. In part, we have attained to liberty. So sometimes I can manage to be good for a little bit. But sustaining it is not so easy. I've been really good. I didn't gospel anybody all for the last 10 minutes. And sometimes that's what we have to do. Take avoidance of sin 5 minutes, 1 minute at a time. I know alcoholics who will say, I stopped drinking 1 minute at a time. Because if an alcoholic says, I can't drink for the rest of my life, it becomes overwhelming. They say, that's too much. I got to have a drink. And so that's very common. But if they say, I'm going to stop drinking for the next 5 minutes, then that they can handle. Sometimes that's all we can deal with. 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes, an hour at a time, as we get better and better. Because we have this mixture inside of us. St. Augustine goes on. Whatever has been our sin was previously wiped out in baptism. So baptism forgives original sin, and if you're an adult, any actual sins. And he had plenty. He wrote them down, that's how I know. But because all our iniquities have been blotted out, has there remained no infirmity? If there had not, we should be living here without sin. Yet, who would venture to say so? But the prideful people say, "Well, I don't have any sin." And that's why I don't ask them. I ask their spouses. But the man unworthy of the deliverer's mercy, people unworthy of God's mercy, they say, "I don't need to be forgiven." He who wishes to be self-deceived. Now, they say, "I don't have any sin." And people who are destitute of the truth. I don't have any sin. They don't know the truth about themselves. Therefore, from the fact that some infirmity remains, I venture to say that in what measure we serve God, we are free. In what measure we serve the law of sin, we are still in bondage. So that whenever we sin, that indicates that we're still not free. When we serve God freely, then we give up that we find more freedom. He goes on in paragraph 18, those who, quote, live by the flesh. It's a phrase from St. Paul. What he means by the flesh is not the body. There's nothing wrong with being in the body, but the flesh is something else. In St. Paul's language and in Jesus too, he uses the same phrase, because the flesh corrupts. If you leave some meat out over, in the heat overnight, you don't want to eat it. It stinks. And that's a symbol, they use that as a sign of the corruption in our personality. Being in a body, this is our nature. Be body and spirit. But, we have this corrupting quality. And people who live by that, who want to gratify the desires of the flesh, the desires of pure instinct without thinking things through, without reason. Whatever comes to my mind, whatever feeling, whatever instinct comes to the foreground, I guess I got to go with it because I can't help myself. I got these instincts. I got these instincts to eat too much, instincts to have sex outside of control, and so on. Those people look at life and God's law as a burden. People who live by the flesh see that God's law is a burden. And they focus on how, God's law is a restriction of my freedom. Who does God think he is to tell me what to do? That's not, and besides, those are men's laws. Remember the temptation by the serpent. Did God really tell you not to eat from any fruit in the garden? God does that because he has bad motives. That's what's wrong. And you should do what you want. That's the fleshly mentality. On the other hand, those who are impelled by love and walk by the Spirit and desire to serve others find in God's law the fundamental and necessary way in which to practice love as something freely chosen and freely lived out. He cites Galatians 5:16 to refer to those who walk by the Spirit. In that paragraph of Galatians 5, he sets those who are by the flesh, those who are by the Spirit. And that's why St. Paul says, I say, walk by the Spirit and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. Just like leaving meat outside in the heat will necessarily leading it to rot, if you follow the desires of the flesh, you will rot. And then it gets worse from there. So this is something that they have to deal with. They feel an interior urge, a necessity, and no longer a form of coercion, not to stop at the minimum demands of the law, but to live the law in their fullness. So that it's not just that I don't want to kill. The people who live by the Spirit, that's what he's talking about. People who live by the Spirit don't just say, well, I won't kill. No, they want to know, what can I do to support life, help encourage life, That's why doctors and nurses and parents do what they can to give of themselves to support life. And other people too, of course. And that you go beyond just not bearing false witness, you seek out the truth and make sure you tell the truth. So you don't stop at the minimum demands, but want the fullness of God's law. This is still an uncertain and fragile journey while we're on earth. But we can make this journey, avoiding the flesh and going more and more towards the Spirit of God. You can do so if we keep seeking the grace of God. We can't do this on our own. We need God's grace to do what is right and good. We're too weak, but God gives us grace to enable us to possess the full freedom of the children of God that Paul spoke of in Romans 8:21. That creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the glorious liberty of the children of God. That's what we seek. A liberty to be good, a freedom to be good, and thus live our moral way of life in a way worthy of our vocation as the children of God. Think for a second. Why do we have to take off our shoes, carry small bottles of liquids on a plane, and go through screening? Why do we have to do that? It wasn't just 20 years ago. People waiting for you could go up to the gate and meet you at the gate. Why do we do that? Because the sins of terrorists have limited our freedom. This is a classic example of how sin curtails freedom. When people did virtue, you had more freedom to go up to the plane. Today you have less freedom. Why do you have so many more gun controls? Because people have used guns to kill unjustly. And so you see, just go through any of the ways that we've done things. Sin keeps limiting our freedom. And this is the way that it goes. So we have a vocation to perfect love. And this vocation is not just for a few Christians. Well, some of you can be perfect and the others can be so-so. Remember, there used to be a movement in psychology, I'm okay, you're okay. And then somebody at one of the houses I lived in had a coffee cup, said, I'm okay, you're okay, he's so-so. No, nobody is called to be so-so as a Christian. All of us are called to be perfect. In this invitation to go sell your possessions, give the money to the poor, and the promise you will have treasure in heaven is meant for everyone because they bring out the full meaning of the commandment of love a neighbor. So, I mean, and is it just applied to priests, nuns, and religious monks and brothers? No. Again, all of you who have children, do you win big prizes and get a lot of money when you have kids? Or you get a lot of sickness because they bring it home from their friends. You get a lot of colds, flu, and everything else that goes through the classroom. But you are giving of yourself for your kids, are you not? This is a good example. I mean, they're born naked, usually crying, and you start giving your stuff to them because, well, you know, I think if I wait long enough, it'll be a good investment. No, it's because you love them. That's where the perfect love is there for us to give to the poor, including our children. And this is an invitation that comes when Jesus says, come follow me. Every one of us is called to follow Jesus. People who are very wealthy are also very commonly, they have a choice to realize I can be very generous. I can provide good jobs for a lot of people because I'm wealthy. And like one radio commentator says, when you want a job, usually it's not a good idea to go to the guy in the street corner with a squeegee and a rag. You know, he's not going to give you a job. He might chase you away. Somebody who can build a factory can give you a job. And many people who become very wealthy are very generous, helping so many people. I see that constantly. Mother Angelica always talked about that. All of us can come follow Jesus, and in a very specific form of the love of God, because that's what following Jesus is about, our love of God, the first commandment, but also leads to love of neighbor, the second commandment. Both the commandments to love God and love neighbor, as well as Jesus' invitation to the rich young man, stand at the service of a single charity. It is an indivisible love and charity. And the charity to which we are called spontaneously tends towards a perfection that we see Jesus speak about at the end of Matthew chapter 5, verse 48 in the Sermon on the Mount. You therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We also see in St. Luke chapter 6, Jesus says there, be merciful even as your Father is merciful. God sets the norm. We love God with our whole heart, mind, and soul. But then he sets the norm for what that love means, what that perfection of love means. Now, does that mean, therefore, well, I guess I have to be exactly what God is? You can't. You're a finite person. God is infinite. And God is not saying, be perfect and infinite or else you go to hell. No. It's rather that you, given your nature as a human being, you perfect the nature you have without trying to have the nature of an angel or the nature of God, have a human nature. And that is what you perfect by loving with everything you've got. What we have to love with is smaller than what God has, but he accepts, just like, again, think of our pets. If you have a dog and he comes up and wags his tail and licks your hand and is real nice to you, that's all you expect for him. You don't expect him to buy you a car. He's not going to do that. Probably won't expect your kids either. But according to his doggy nature, he's as loving as he knows how to be. And that's what we call a good dog, right? And God says, you're good humans if you love according to your nature with everything you've got. That's the perfection God calls us to. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll start taking questions from you as well as our studio audience, so please stay with us. Thank you, welcome. First of all, I want to invite you to come down here, like these nice folks have done, and be a part of a pilgrimage with at EWTN. The weather is just really beautiful. The trees, some of the first blossoms have fallen, but now other trees are blossoming. And I do recommend you bring something for your allergies. There's a lot of pollen out there, but that goes with the beauty because they want it to spread. So if you can, do call our pilgrimage department at 205-271-2966. Or go to the website EWTN.com and they'll give you information about scheduling of masses, programs, and a wide variety of places to stay and places, directions up to Hansville, so you can go see the sisters up there. So we'd love to have you come. So please come and join us. All right, we're going to start off with a caller. Hello, Jennifer.
Yes, hi.
Hi, where are you from?
Father, how are you?
Fine, where are you from?
Connecticut.
Great.
It's damp up here right now. I'm sure it's beautiful down where you are.
Yeah, well, it'll get beautiful eventually. You know, the president,
I know.
the
Everything
president
goes
had promised to end global warming, and y'all are experiencing that. He's very successful. So God bless you. So anyway.
Whoa, whoa, Father.
Yeah.
Father. I'll correct you on that. That's not global warming. It's climate change.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Use
was
the
going
right
back to
terminology.
2008. I think he changed it, but 2008 was global warming. So anyway, so what's
But
the?
it should be. Anyway, all right. So, okay. My question for you is as this: Jesus gave us 2 rules to follow.
Yeah.
Love God, whole heart, whole mind, whole spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. You're talking about rules just now.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it the Catholic Church has decided to yoke people down with the catecheses and all the extra rules and regs for sacraments? I'd ask you about a particular verse in the Bible, too, if you want to address that first question.
Okay, well,
continue on to heart view.
Sure. Here, no, Jennifer, stay on a second. First of all,
Yeah.
you know, what we've been going through is that Jesus, in Matthew 19, in speaking to the rich young man, said, you know,
Right.
that thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal. Now, why did God give those commandments? Because there are some people who kill. There are people who steal. And they don't understand that love means that you cannot steal other people's property. They have a right to own that property, and you don't have a right to kill them and take it. You don't have a
I
right,
understand.
and you don't have a right to bear false witness. You have to tell the
I
truth.
understand all that.
I
understand all that.
All
But
right,
we're going back to almost 2,000 years ago.
Oh, no. It's actually longer than that. Those commandments were given 3,200 years ago. However, one of the things that we also see, did you raise children?
Yes, I've done.
All right. And, you know, when your kids are growing up, you know, there are certain things that you have to say specifically for them at different ages, correct? And you don't tell 3-year-olds, when you drive the car, fill it up when you bring it home.
Yeah, okay.
No, you don't do that, do you? But you do tell a 3-year-old, you may not ride your bicycle in the street. Now, that commandment is very sensible for a 3-year-old, correct?
Right.
Because the specific situation that he's too small or she's too small for cars to see them. So and this is one of the other things with various other rules that came up. A lot of issues especially as the church spread to the pagan world, where a lot of issues were, not considered moral questions, or they were moral questions, say about marriage. But for instance, in Greece and Rome, infidelity in marriage was just considered normal, right, both by men and women. And so you have to make very clear to them that even though you're married, you may not mess around with other people. And that's why the church, you have, just like you as a parent, out of love for your child, had to adapt laws for each stage and each different circumstance you're in. If you and your family live near a river, you have to tell the kids don't go near the river. But if they live in a desert, you don't have to worry about that. You have to tell them don't pick up the scorpions. Right? Because kids like to play with bugs. And so you have to adapt to each different situation the rules that fit the problems. And that's what the church has had to do over the centuries, to work out the specifics of what is right and wrong as we go through cultural changes. All right, we have a question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
We are, my daughter and I, from Uruguay, South America.
Welcome. You win the long distance
Thank you.
award today.
Yes, thank
Uruguay
you.
is a good long way off. So what is your question?
Well, Father Mitch, how long in the history of the church the relationship between freedom and God's law has been being preached?
Okay, how long has it been preached that freedom and God's law necessarily need each other? St. Paul wrote Galatians, well, we don't know the exact date. Romans we can date. He wrote Romans in the early spring of 58 AD. He's already writing that. And Galatians is probably before that. So we see already in the 50s, within 25 years, they're writing about it. But he's not writing about it as if it were something new. He's writing about it, well, of course. So we can only assume that they had been saying that already. But the earliest passages I can think of are those two from the mid-50s, by 58 at the latest. And again, probably preached well before that, and not a new, see, he's not saying, I'm giving you a new idea here. No, it's what he'd been saying, and had gone to the Galatians probably back in the 40s. So it just seems to be something they took for granted and just were preaching. Okay? All right. Let's go over to Kevin. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Hi, where are you from?
Anderson, California. We're having a lot of rain here.
Good. I know you need it out there.
The question is, Father, a young Christian soldier, he doesn't want to seem coward in front of his other soldiers. An enemy wants to kill him. What does he do then when he has to kill an enemy that's trying to kill him?
Now, Kevin, are you asking that because of the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill"?
Yes, not the shall not kill. There's an enemy that's trying to. Hello.
Kill. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I hear you fine.
Then I'll turn off the phone and you can answer my question.
Sure. All right, Kevin. Something that's very important to understand about the commandment. In Hebrew, there are 3 words for killing. One, harag, is used for killing people in battle. Also, hemit, which means cause somebody to be dead. And that is used for battle. It's used for executing criminals, and so on. But neither one of those general words for killing is used in the commandment. In the commandment, it says, al tirtzah. Now, the word ratzah means kill by stealth. See, this is where it's somewhat confusing in English. That it should have been the word murder. You know, I think that would be a much more appropriate term to use in English to translate the commandment. You don't murder. And it doesn't prohibit all killing. Now, what the young soldier that you're talking about has to be aware of, if he kills the enemy just so that he doesn't look like a coward among his peers, he is not thinking correctly. You don't kill an enemy because you want your peers to think well of you. It's not right. You kill an enemy who is trying to kill you and other people. And with that, you have to pay attention to this, because we have to deal with, is the war engaged in just? That's a very important question. And it's not always easy to answer. But one of the things that the church has done, going back to the earlier question, we have to deal with some specific situations. In the early church, they were dealing with barbarians trying to come in, rob, rape, and kill. That's what the barbarians did for a living. They would rob, rape, and kill. You have a moral right to protect yourself and a moral obligation to protect those who are too weak to protect themselves. If a soldier kills an enemy in that situation who is unjustly invading to do some damage he has no right to do, then you may protect yourself. And that's one of the things that they have to decide on. And that's, today, especially that we have a volunteer army, soldiers need to think that through before they sign up. They have to think about that very clearly. And under what grounds they will not invade somebody else. And in general, the United States, in general, does not try to invade countries to take their territory. We're not trying to create an empire. I know some people disagree, but that's not, we did not conquer Germany to make it a colony of the United States. We wanted them to stop murdering and killing everybody else during the Third Reich. But we wanted them to become a democracy. And we helped them flourish economically after the war. And this is in general what we do. Soviet Union was a little bit different. They would take everybody's stuff. Again, ask the East Europeans. So these are the moral questions you have to deal with. And that's definitely a soldier can defend himself and his comrades. Okay. All right, I have another question. Ma'am, where are you from?
From Missouri, the
Great.
St. Louis area.
Show me.
The Show Me
No.
State, with a few of our friends. Father, you were teaching us that we should try to become perfect, and yet the Bible also says that all have fallen short of the glory of God. So how do we reconcile that? Where's the balance?
Okay, remember what that quotation I gave you from St. Augustine, that we have these two things going on inside of us. We want to do what's good, but we also have another inclination that we don't want to do what's good. We want to do what's selfish. And this is what we have to overcome. By the power of God's grace, we can overcome it. And that's what we seek, to overcome that by God's grace. So this is, yes, we fall short. And St. Paul writes, again, I gave that quotation, great passage to look at. Romans chapter 7, verse 14 through the end of the chapter, about how he struggles. This is the reality of human life. The Christians want to be good, but they find it very difficult. Okay, and that's what we're dealing with. So yes, we fall short of the glory of God, but we're called to perfection. We have to perfect those imperfections that we bring with us and make that different. And again, while we're here in this life, that struggle will go on. In heaven, the perfect will be perfected completely. Lord, look forward to that. All right, we have another caller. Hello, Robert.
Hi, Father. How are you?
Fine. Where are you from?
New York City.
And what can we do for you?
I have a question about the Apostles' Creed. Now, in the Apostles' Creed, we say Christ died, he was buried, he descended into hell, and the third day he rose again from the dead. That's not really what we believe. We believe he descended to the place of the dead,
Right.
not hell.
Right.
Hell is a place of eternal damnation from which there's no escape. We believe he descended to where the good people were, Moses,
Right.
Abraham, who were
Right.
awaiting redemption.
Right.
How did it come about, on the history of the Apostles' Creed, that we say something that we really don't believe?
Okay, now, actually, I'll explain it to you, Lucy. You're not Lucy, but
Robert.
I still love those old shows. Here it is, Robert. The Old English word Hella was the equivalent of the Greek word Hades or Hades. That was the place of the dead. Only later did the English word Hella become hell of the damnation. It didn't have that meaning in Old English. This is going. You see this in Norse mythology and some of the Germanic myths that they used that as the place because they didn't believe that you went to heaven. There was this place that the souls of the great warriors and heroes might go, Valhalla. But that was only for the really great heroes. Most didn't go to Valhalla. They went to Hella, which was this place of the dead. When the English language changed and hell came to mean the place of the damned, then, but the prayer did not keep up with that change in language. And so that's why now the translation is to say that he went down to the dead. That's why. So your analysis is absolutely correct. The issue is simply one to deal with, the change in language. Okay, and that's why translations have to be done regularly because language changes. All right, we have Patrick on the line. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Father.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from Des Moines, Iowa.
Wonderful. Good to have you here. And what can we do for you?
Father, about 15 years ago, I was at a Mass, and I was a very devout Catholic. Mm-hmm. The priest tried to tell us who to vote for and how to cast our ballots. Mm-hmm. I became very mad because I'm a very devout liberal in a lot of ways, and I don't think he should have done such, and we had a long discussion over it, and I finally actually even ended up leaving the church. Mm-hmm. Do you think I should try to come back to it, or will the church even accept me back?
Of course the church will accept you back. And again, there are a couple things that we need to keep in mind. There are moral issues where the church must speak out. Issues of life. And I am very critical of the president because he had told then Archbishop, now Cardinal Dolan, that the health care bill will not require Catholics to include abortion and birth control, and that therefore he wanted the bishop's support, which they gave because of that promise. And they walked out on us. And then 7 weeks later, when the bill was passed, he reversed that and required everybody to do that. That's why we're fighting a lawsuit. That doesn't mean
that's what I've kept up with.
Well, but see, but here's the thing: that does not mean you should not vote for him. But it also means, and I don't tell anybody how to vote, but it also means I have to stand up for the moral issue as a priest. But I don't tell anybody how to vote. That is something because I know that there are a variety of other issues that you might be concerned with. But the president, bold-faced, told one thing to the cardinal and then completely reversed it to the opposite 7 weeks later. And I have to call him out. And so that's one thing. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't vote for him. As far as, and the church must stand up for those moral issues. And as a Catholic, you can vote for somebody and disagree with them. I haven't agreed with politicians I voted for on everything by any means. Because I judge the people I vote for of either party, and I voted both parties, on the basis of the gospel of Christ, not my party or my philosophy. And that would be Catholic. If you can be Catholic that way, then of course come back, because you need Christ, and you need the politicians, and philosophy won't get you to heaven. Jesus will. All right. Lord bless you and keep you throughout this Easter season, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill, and we will pay our bills too. Thank you.